previous government announced measures in May which set out to combat this. Yet so far, the measures announced by this government are insufficient. When will this government finally recognize the importance of small business and announce immediately meaningful tax cuts?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will reiterate that we are committed to business here in the province of Nova Scotia. We've demonstrated that commitment, and we will continue to do that. We will continue to do that. We've helped the construction industry of Nova Scotia with the new home rebate. We will continue with the efforts and the track that we are currently on, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal. Mr. Speaker, we heard lots of talk of stimulus from government, especially in regards to highway and infrastructure. However, with potential cuts to highway project, it begs an answer from this minister. So my question to the minister is, have any highway or infrastructure projects been cancelled or delayed due to funding reallocation this year?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for his question. When it comes to, of course, having stimulus funding, we're on a constant flow, I want you to know, with projects coming and going. We submit lists, we hear back from the federal department. The federal department, for one reason or another, looks at this project or that project, and there's a lot of give and take being involved. There are projects where I want to assure you that at times I question why they're not going forward, yet we continue to be in touch with Ottawa and we continue to put forth the best case available. This is a project which we support. This is a project the Nova Scotians want. And we go back and forth on a number of occasions, and at this stage, there are many negotiations still yet to be finalized.
The Honourable Member for Clare on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the previous government delayed on providing this House a priority list for highways, and we heard so much about change from the current government. I hope we can expect something different today. So my question to the minister is, will the minister undertake to table the priority list for highway projects in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite. And I know that member at one time served in Cabinet, and I know he's served in a number of important positions. As the Cabinet Minister responsible for highways, when projects are brought to my attention and we look at them on a first-come, first-served basis, when we make sure that we have the money available, when the issues are finally, when we look back on the issues that are important to you as a member or to members on this side for a particular project, I want you to know that when the money is not there, sometimes there have to be tough decisions that are going to have to be made. Mr. Speaker, I assure all members of the House that all projects are looked at very carefully. Sometimes because of various delays, the election, for example, was a time that during the last number of months that no tenders could be assigned during that particular time. There will not be projects that will all be completed in this budget year, but I want you to know all projects are being considered.
The Honourable Member for Clare on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the maintenance and improvement of our highways is not only good for economic development, but it's crucial keeping our roads safe and our drivers secure. So my final question to the Minister, when can we expect a highway priority list to be tabled in this House?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you again to the member for that question. We all, of course, completely agree that safety remains a priority for roads in this province. And in addition, economic development, on many occasions, particularly in rural parts of the province, it is crucial that roads are maintained in such a fashion as goods, people and services can move from one end of the province to the other. This government will continue to make sure that we Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want the member opposite to know that we will consider
The Honourable Minister of Transportation has the floor.
Thank you. To the member opposite, I know that because of the good issues that you've brought to my attention, we will continue to address the issues in your constituency. Members on that side, particularly some members, of course, who've met with me privately about their concerns, and members of my own caucus. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations. Mr. Speaker, prior to the last election, the NDP went out of their way to gain political favour within the CBRM. From their own election correspondence, and I quote, "The NDP is prepared to undertake improvements to the equalization formula in consultation with the CBRM, UNSM, and other stakeholders, but within the context of a balanced budget," end quote. Even their election material started to veer away from their prior enthusiasm for the CBRM. Mr. Speaker, after 100 days in office, will the minister inform this House of what commitments she's made to Nova Scotia's second largest municipality, its mayor and council?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that question. I welcome an opportunity to meet with the Mayor and members of the Council in Cape Breton. I'm just waiting for when the House rises. That will be my first priority, to travel to Cape Breton.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North on his first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, after 100 days, she's had lots of opportunity to travel to Cape Breton, but apparently that's not the case. And as the minister would know, the CBRM is the second largest metropolitan area in our province with over 100,000 residents. And I think, Mr. Speaker, they're due the presence of a minister to go down and talk to them about their issues. But what has been clear from this is the minister hasn't taken the time, from what sounds, to even talk to them, let alone visit Cape Breton or meet with their officials and council and communicate with those individuals. Mr. Speaker, will the minister please inform this House how she possibly can meet the infrastructure and community support needs of the CBRM if she won't even talk to them?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you. It was a very busy first 100 days, and I've met with every group that has asked to meet with me. And unfortunately, I did not have a request from CBRM for a meeting. But as I repeat, it is my first priority to travel to Cape Breton as soon as the House rises, and I welcome the opportunity to meet the Mayor and Council members in Cape Breton.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do welcome the direction of the minister to at least make a commitment to go at some place at a time to Cape Breton, and hopefully it won't be another 100 days before she makes that trip to Cape Breton, because the people there deserve it. And hopefully while she's there, unlike the Minister of Economic Development, she does more than have tea and dinners and networking. It's about action and results the people of that area that have been looking for from municipal relations, from economic development. Mr. Speaker, what is clear is that in the 100+ days of being a government, they have no plan for the second largest municipality in this province. So again, to the minister, what types of issues will she discuss with them, and more importantly, commitments she'll make to the people of the Cape Breton Regional Municipality?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer the question about what questions I'll be answering are the questions that I'll be asked by the Mayor. And with the consultation and discussion, I will make commitments based on their requests within the context of a balanced budget. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal. Mr. Speaker, on September 11, 2009, the member from Halifax, Clayton Park and I sent a letter to the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal outlining our concerns about the replacement of the Fairview overpass. This construction project will last until at least March 2010. Mr. Speaker, in our letter, we offered the Minister some constructive suggestions for easing the gridlock. My question to the Minister, since this replacement is set to begin, I would like to know if you've read the letter and examined our suggestions.
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member from Bedford Birch Cove for this important question, because I've heard from many Nova Scotians who are regular commuters on that very busy stretch of highway, and the more suggestions and the more input that we receive, the better, because there will be delays, there will be inconveniences, but it is work that is necessary to go forth on. Your September 11th correspondence has crossed my desk. I have had regular meetings with members of my staff, and I know there's been some interaction between the HRM, as there usually is on issues such as this, and the Department of Transportation Infrastructure Renewal. We are currently in the middle of an education process to make sure that people are well aware of what is happening during the busy rush hours to and from. And I would like to table this particular piece of information, which of course will be brought forward to the residents in your community and the residents member from Halifax Clayton Park. It's of course safety first, but it does take these advice, take alternate routes, drive a bit earlier and later than usual, take a carpool, and make Metro Transit work for you.
Okay.
So I want the member opposite to know that we're listening to your concerns.
Thank you.
We're listening to your constituents. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have seen the ads and heard the discussion on the radio this morning, but the member from Clayton Park and I are very concerned about the indications that lanes traveling into Halifax are going to be reduced to just one, with 2 lanes going out. Now, this is a recipe for traffic chaos in HRM. Mr. Speaker, thousands of residents drive over this overpass every day. With so much traffic from the outlying areas of HRM, this construction will cause massive traffic congestion and huge delays. My question to the Minister: what provisions has your department put in place to alleviate the heavy traffic congestion we are sure to see from this replacement project?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for this question. There is no doubt there's going to be inconveniences and there are going to be delays. You know, it has been closely looked at by members of the department that I am fortunate enough to be the minister of, and also the Streets and Roads Division within the HRM. It has been decided that there would not be reversing lanes. It would cause too much difficulty, particularly during winter construction. Winter construction is going to cause some real concerns in that particular dreadlock, which we face it every time, and I know that in many occasions when it comes to deadlock, that's where it happens each and every morning. But with the confusing of reversing lanes, it's been decided that would not be a good idea, that we have a regular traffic pattern so that we would not have to put up with this reversing lanes as they tune every day. Winter is the difficult time for when it comes to construction. That's why the decision is made not just by my department, but by the department.
Thank you, Minister.
Yeah, not a bad speech, though.
Yeah. The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, reversing lanes was just one of the many suggestions that the member and I gave to you in that letter. The Mayor of HRM has already stated to us that they cannot add buses, for example, during peak hours to help ease congestion because they don't have any more buses to add. My question to the Minister: is your government prepared to assist HRM financially so they can rent buses for peak hours of traffic? And have you spoken to your own government about allowing public service employees the opportunity for flex hours to relieve congestion?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question. The Fairview Overpass project is one that is a top priority for this government and a top priority for the HRM. We are in regular communication with the city, with the regional municipality on this issue. We're looking forward to their input. We're looking forward to the concerns that are going to be brought forward to us. Metro Transit is an important part of the solution. It's an important part of the solution because in many occasions, and I see it in my community, Mr. Speaker, as I drive to and from, one person, one vehicle. I would suggest that we look at that particular bottleneck. We look at it as a good test to see how we can make an improvement to the Fairview overpass. It's a project of some importance, and we look forward to be completed on time as of March 1st, 2010.
Thank you, Mr. I'll recognize the Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Minister of Economic and Rural Development. The minister yesterday indicated to the hosts that he met with the Port Authority in Sydney. The Sydney and Area Chamber of Commerce has identified the dredging of Sydney Harbour as a top priority for its 600 members. The previous government has contributed $2 million to this project. Before and during the election, the NDP were in favour of this project. My question to the minister is this: what steps have you taken as minister, not your department, you as minister, taken to move the dredging of Sydney Harbour forward and making it a key plank to the Gateway Initiative?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. And yes, it is true that I met with the Port Authority, and I thought we had a very, very good introductory meeting, and we will continue to move forward. We've had one meeting, so.
Okay. The honourable member for Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And maybe somehow we can get into the Hansard, a shrug of the shoulders, one meeting. I don't know what that means, but anyway, Mr. Minister, as you know, the dredging of Sydney Harbour is not only important to Cape Breton, but it is important for the economic development right across Nova Scotia. Among the benefits of dredging the harbour are the fact that Nova Scotia Power would be able to bring in larger ships of coal into the port, and thus cutting down on the number of shipments that would be needed. That would probably mean stabilization of prices for all Nova Scotians. Yesterday, in Hansard, you said, "We've entertained, I've attended dinners, I've done some networking." My question to you is quite simple, Mr. Speaker. When is this minister going to come forward with a real plan for the people of Cape Breton regarding the dredging of Sydney Harbour, instead of simply entertaining, attending dinners, and networking?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, I think as we move forward, it's very, very important that we meet with people, that we see what their needs are, and it's incumbent also some of the communities that we've met with, including Sydney, we're interested in seeing their plan. We've had they gave us a verbal presentation. My ask for them was to provide that to me in writing, and I trust that they will do that in due time.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, and I would suggest to the minister that maybe if he asked his department to look in the files, he would already have a copy of what the plan is for the dredging of Sydney Harbour. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know that the dredging is important for the economic rebirth in Cape Breton. And as well, we know that another key plank of the Gateway Initiative is maintenance and improvement of the Sydney to Port Hawkesbury rail line. The current subsidy for this crucial piece of infrastructure, it will soon run out. Mr. Speaker, is this minister prepared to continue the subsidy for this railroad so that the Port of Sydney will be an integral part of the Atlantic Gateway? Yes or no, Mr. Minister? Yes or no?
Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, actually, the railway hasn't approached me yet, and I certainly would encourage.
The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would encourage. The member opposite to pass the message along that I'd be willing to meet with him at any time.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Affairs. Mr. Speaker, the government's mixed residential or commercial energy rebate program would appear to be flawed. Nova Scotians are not happy with it. It has caused confusion for a lot of people. People who are not receiving an income from their non-residential space are being charged more to have their oil tanks filled. Mr. Speaker, this is a direct hit on seniors and those who lived on a fixed income. And my question for the minister is, what is being done for people who receive no income from their property use, yet still are being charged more to heat it?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I unfortunately don't really understand the essence of the question, so could I please have that question repeated? I apologize.
Yes, you may. I'll ask the member again if he would ask this question.
Would you like me to start from the very beginning, Mr. Speaker? Would you like me to do that? Perhaps a little slower, Mr. Speaker. I'm asking the minister what's being done for people who receive no income from their property use, but they're being charged more to actually heat it, what's known as the Commercial Energy Rebate Program.
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much. What I'm going to answer that, and I will make apologies, but I will get back to the honourable member with the information probably by later on today. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps a little explanation is in order here, Mr. Speaker. The rebate has not been designed, apparently, with the user in mind. This rebate requires that a 4-page application has to be filled out each and every time, and the application can only be submitted in April, July, October, and January of each year. And then the applicants are told that they have 4 to 6 weeks to wait for their paperwork to be processed each and every time. Mr. Speaker, that isn't an easy process, and people likely have mixed-use properties, do not have accounting departments. So my next question for the minister is, in the past 102 days that this government has been in power, what has the minister done to eliminate all of that red tape?
The Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you. I don't think that there's anything wrong with being able to say that I am not familiar with this question. I have not received any complaints or literature or any letters from anybody with this particular difficulty. If the honourable member would provide me with the information that I need, then I would be able to answer his question in a timely manner. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I have the questions. She's supposed to have the answers. But perhaps, Mr. Speaker, she may want to talk to her Premier, and let me tell you why, Mr. Speaker. On October 30th of last year, the Premier, while he was still on this side of the House, had some serious concerns about the very same program. So, Mr. Speaker, it would make sense that after 102 days in power, no changes have been made. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to direct my final question to the Premier. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to use his own words, words that he spoke to then Premier Rodney MacDonald. And, Mr. Speaker, I quote, "My question for the Premier is this: why is this Premier imposing this kind of red tape on so many Nova Scotia families and seniors?"
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My understanding with respect to the program was that it had to do with the way in which the databases were composed. I remember the former minister indicating that coordination had been looked after. I myself have not received any further complaints about the program to date, but I'm sure that the minister, as she's represented to the member opposite, would be happy to look at the program to see if there are further complaints, and if there are ways in which we can deal with red tape in order to smooth that process, then we'd be happy to do so.
The Honourable Member from Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is through you to the Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, the people of Spring Hill and Antigonish have had their faith in this government shattered by the move of the minister to walk away from commitments to construct correctional facilities in their communities. Mr. Speaker, will the minister confirm that this is not the case and that he will continue to move forward with the Spring Hill and Antigonish facilities?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
As I've stated, Mr. Speaker, earlier in the House, that the business case is being developed. Once the business case is completed, action will be taken.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the people of Antigonish and Spring Hill will be interested by that lack of a non-answer from the minister. Mr. Speaker, much effort and planning went into realizing new correctional infrastructure in partnerships with both of these communities. In Spring Hill, the business case, as the minister would like to suggest, is a working partnership with Corrections Canada, which just makes plain sense. What doesn't is the move of this government to turn their backs on these communities, infrastructure, and needed jobs. Mr. Speaker, will the minister state unequivocally that he'll honour the commitments made to Spring Hill and Antigonish, or is he going to continue to play politics with these communities?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition there seems to be, it's very important to them that the minister go to their communities. I want to state that I've been in those communities. I've had the pleasure of meeting with them, hearing their concerns from a number of other communities. Each are important, and once the business case is finished, we will make a very informed decision that's in the best interest of the taxpayers of Nova Scotia, that will stay in line with the needs of the correctional worker and the people that have to reside in the institutions.
The member for Cape Breton North on your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And apparently, the new government has spent over the last 100 days obviously doing some visiting, having some tea, having some dinners, some networking, but not taking action on the things that are important to those communities and those people. And since the minister fails to deal with this issue, maybe I can try his colleague, the Minister of Service of Nova Scotia Municipal Relations. Mr. Speaker, since she's now into travel mode, would the minister commit to visit both Spring Hill and Antigonish and meet with local officials to explain why the Minister of Justice refuses to honour the commitment of new correctional facilities for their communities?
The Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If invited by the municipalities to speak with anybody to do anything to do with the municipalities, my door is open, and I would welcome the invitation if invited. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question today is for the Minister of Education. On the day of the swearing-in, somebody said 102 days ago, I had the pleasure to speak with the Minister of Education about the renovations that have been long overdue, many times announced, many times apparently budgeted for, but not yet even started at Prince Andrew High School in Dartmouth. Those renovations were first announced by the Department of Education in 2003. We're told they were going to start in 2007 and be completed in 2011. They still haven't been completed. So I know the minister knows the importance of these renovations, so my question to the minister is, when is the tender going out for those renovations?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I share the concern of the honourable member for Prince Andrew High School because a number of students from my own constituency attend that school. And certainly I've been inquiring as to the capital budget and how it impacts on that school. And during the supply debate, hopefully I'll be able to answer those questions. But I don't think it's appropriate for me to be specifying timelines and money related to the budget during the question period. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the original estimate for renovations, it was supposed to cost $8.85 million to renovate the school. And that's from Department of Education estimates. That number's almost certainly gone up now because a lot of the items in the school that were supposed to be renovated have now collapsed or deteriorated further. As I noted before, the work was supposed to be completed by 2011, and while I understand the Minister may wish to give further detail and estimates, which I look forward to, this government during the election campaign committed that they would honour every single one of the previous government's infrastructure commitments, and this was one that was made over and over by the department. So can she confirm that those renovations are going ahead?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly, the issue of the renovations and upgrading to Prince Andrew High School has been a topic of interest in this legislature for a number of years. And I remember on an annual basis during the supply debates estimates that the former member for Dartmouth East had a deep interest in Prince Andrew High School and would ask the question of the former government. And I certainly will be prepared to give some details during estimates. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Dartmouth East on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad the Minister of Education brought up my predecessor, the former member for Dartmouth East, because in fact during the election campaign, in a debate that any member can watch on YouTube currently if they want, the member said it would be an immediate priority of an NDP government to immediately issue the tender for the renovations at Prince Andrew High School. It is now 102 days, and where's the tender?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Stay tuned. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Community Services and Housing. I would like to know what protocol is with that minister to responding to correspondence, i.e. emails, letters, phone calls, etc. And all members of this House would like to know the time frame that she gets back to people. Is it an hour from the time she receives it, a day, a week, a month, a year, or never?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Member for his question. Due to the fact that I come from a very strong communications background, I very often, there's emails that I get back to people immediately, and it depends on the email or the telephone call. So I do respect each and every contact that's made with me, and we take due process to get back to the individual or the group in a timely manner. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Yarmouth on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much for getting me that answer. Mr. Speaker, I sent the minister on August 12th a letter requesting a meeting. I did a follow-up letter on September 17th with no response to either letter. I have here an article by the local media, the Vanguard, and Michael Gorham. In his article, he's tried for 2 weeks to have an interview with that minister and no response. I have another article here with the Mayor Mooney from my town asking for a meeting about the housing crisis in our community, and that minister has yet to respond. We had a meeting with 2 of her staff, but she has never stepped foot in our community. I want to know, will that minister meet with my community to talk about the housing crisis that we are in Yarmouth?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I must comment to the Honourable Member that what he's saying is not true. I had spoken to the reporters. Any calls that I received that are filtrated through to my office directly to me, I respond immediately. And also with respect to Mayor Mooney, the staff met and we did correspond, and I did send out correspondence to him with respect to the staff meeting with him. So I actually am not quite sure if he has any kind of information he would like to table so I can see proof of his comments. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
The honourable member for Yarmouth on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'd be honoured to table all the documents I just mentioned. There's the 2 letters, Mr. Speaker. There's the 2 articles, and I think I heard that Michael Gorman is misleading the people of Yarmouth, and he is doing the article in the local Vanguard that he quotes that he's tried for 2 weeks to have correspondence with that minister, and she never returned his calls. Mr. Speaker, we have asked that minister to meet with the citizens of Yarmouth. There's a housing crisis in Yarmouth, Mr. Speaker. We have 120 people that's displaced right now in Yarmouth. We have winter coming, and that minister's turned her back, like all members of that government. The Premier has not even entered our community yet. Mr. Speaker, there happens to be an airline coming to our community morning and night. She could fly down in the morning and fly back at night, and we will make sure that there's tea and biscuits. If that minister would come down and tell the people of our community what they're going to do about the housing crisis.
Okay, question. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to say, with respect to the housing crisis, staff actually has met with the mayor and the councillors as soon as that we received indication that there was an issue there. They met, senior staff went to Yarmouth and met with the members of council and people that, organizations that required a meeting. Okay.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services has the floor.
I would like to state that I am extremely accessible and that I have always been that way, and I invite people to come and speak with me or give me a call, and I respond to them. So.
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, Brickadoon Children's Camp Society is a not-for-profit organization that is working to develop an exceptional year-round facility for residential camps for children and youth living with a chronic illness. This exceptional work and the service this facility will provide is tied to extensive outdoor recreation for these children. However, Mr. Speaker, the land nearby is in danger, as it is owned by Wagner Forest Management, who is now in the process of selling the land on the world market. My question to the Minister: the Aylesford and Loon Lake Property Owners Association and Brickadoon want a meeting to deal with the province to help purchase land in this area. Will you and the MLA for Kings South meet with these groups?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and by all means, I'd be very pleased to meet with any groups.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They did ask. It is now over a week that I guess eventually they will hear. Mr. Speaker, Brickadoon supplies a wide range of outdoor activities. These activities stem upon having adequate land nearby and is not invaded by any sort of commercial development. My question to the Minister: is the Minister aware of how critical a buffer zone is to Brickadoon, a world-class facility for chronically ill children, to protect intense development within meters of their facility?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I have to say that I'm not particularly familiar with that facility, but I could recognize that having a kind of a pristine environment around it would kind of add to the quality of it. I want the honourable member to be aware that the people who own the abutting land, it's private property, but I'd be more than happy to meet with the group to discuss their issues.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your first supplementary. No, excuse me, your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for the Minister's information, their prime building will be within 100 feet of land owned by Wagner. Mr. Speaker, Wagner's Forest Management is a forest management organization. This is a tremendous opportunity for Wagner Forest Management to be a good corporate citizen, partner with the province to protect these lands. We can ill afford these lands to be purchased by the wrong hands. Will the minister commit today to making every attempt to purchase Wagner-owned lands for the protection of Brigadoon?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I think the member could recognize that if I made that commitment to him today, there'd just be a lineup of members across the benches asking for the same thing, which I think would be extremely unrealistic of me to do that for him or anybody else. But I'd be glad to take a look and see what would be possible.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservatives.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Community Services. Your colleague, the member from Dartmouth North, said in this legislature on November 12th of last year, and I quote, "It was important for the 81,000 individuals living in poverty, including 19,000 children in Nova Scotia, to have an increase in their basic allowance so that those living in poverty can purchase the basic necessities." Since you became minister nearly 4 months ago, have you and the member from Dartmouth North discussed the basic allowance, and what action have you taken on behalf of those families and individuals living in poverty?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, that is a budget question. Thank you.
Okay. The Honourable Minister, the Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservatives on your first supplementary.
Well, I could repeat the first one because obviously it was misunderstood, but my first supplementary is this. Our government allocated an additional $19 million towards the basic allowance late last year, an increase that was severely criticized by the NDP members. Can this minister provide the House today with details of her plan on changes to the basic allowance?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. I will give you a little bit further explanation. I had real difficulty when I looked at the figures and what we had available in the budget, because it was the former government's budget, and I know that they took a lot of criticism for that $4 a month increase. And it is a very difficult situation when you're looking at the amount of monies that you have available. And it is the former government's budget, but we are looking forward to go making changes.
The Minister of Community Services has the floor.
We are looking forward to consult and to look at what decisions we can make to help the most vulnerable people, and we're going forward with that after this particular budget. Thank you.
The Leader of the Progressive Conservatives on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that the minister understand and learn the difference between a budget issue and a policy issue. But I will ask the following question. When the announcement of the additional $19 million for the basic allowance was made last fall, this is the party, now the government, that said it wasn't enough. My question to the minister is, what amount does your NDP government plan to increase for this basic allowance?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I can answer the question myself. I have a great deal of respect for Bill Esterbrooks. Thank you. Mr. Speaker. Amberley.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, I do understand the fact is that it is not enough money, and it does pain me that that's the situation our province is in because of a former government that did not dedicate themselves to help the vulnerable, and I'm going forth to look at what we can do to help the vulnerable. Thank you.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. Mr. Speaker, when will the minister act on past NDP promises and allow individual municipalities to ban the use of cosmetic pesticides?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for that question. I am very pleased to say that interdepartmentally with health and with the environment and with Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, we are proceeding on our commitment that we have made during the election and commitment to Nova Scotians. Thank you.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since the Supreme Court of Canada ruling in 2001, the move to ban the cosmetic use of pesticides at the local level has continued, with over 60 municipalities across this country passing their own laws. In that unanimous ruling, Mr. Speaker, the justices wrote that such a law is best achieved by the level of government closest to the citizens affected. So my question to the minister is, when will her government provide powers to municipalities other than Halifax Regional Municipality and permit them to ban the use of cosmetic pesticides? When exactly will that happen, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. At this time, we are looking at making sure that we are following the recommendations as put forward by the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities, and we honour their commitment for this and the recommendation. And as I speak, we're working towards that. Thank you.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, while Halifax is the only municipal unit in this province with the authority to ban pesticides, there are other towns that are keen to introduce similar bans and are pushing for that right. The town of Truro, Mr. Speaker, passed a bylaw last year regulating residential use of cosmetic pesticides starting this year. Very democratic of the town of Truro, Mr. Speaker. One might say new and democratic, as a matter of fact. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is, when will your 102-day-old government amend the Municipal Government Act and allow communities to ban the use of cosmetic pesticides?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am going to defer this over to the Minister of the Environment, not because I do not know the answer to this, but the Minister's Department is the lead with this bit of work, so I would pass it over to the Minister. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the member opposite, I just want to point out that this is on my radar screen, and we're reviewing all the options. I also want to point out, Mr. Speaker, that I had the privilege of meeting my counterparts in Newfoundland, and we are working towards harmonizing this and having more of a regional approach, Mr. Speaker. So I just want to assure the member opposite that this is on my radar screen. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Argyll.
You're dying for a question, hey, Graham.
Order. Time has expired for oral question period. Thank you for your cooperation today. It's been a good question period. I'll recognize the Deputy House Leader for the Progressive Conservatives, the Honourable Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call resolution number 28, ER closures, for debate?
Resolution number 28, ER closures. I'll recognize the Honourable Member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm just sort of trying to sneak a little bit of information here.
Was it 28 or 48? Oh, it's the same one. Sorry. Mr. Speaker, speaking on behalf of our caucus when it comes to this resolution, when it comes to ER closures in this province. And I thought I would spend the next 8 minutes or so that's accorded to me to speak of the continuing issue of ER closures in this province. You know, for a number of days we've been running these resolutions and basically counting the days that the NDP have been in government and the continuing issues of closures that we've been having. And in particular are a number of ERs, such as Shelburne, Roseway Hospital that we talked about a number of days ago that is probably closed for the next, 12 days during the month. Something like every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, or something like that. And the member for Shelburne, on many occasions, criticized us as government before those closures, and said it wasn't good enough, and it wasn't good enough for his residents to have to consult a closure list to see if they can go to the emergency room or not. Mr. Speaker, this continues to happen after 102 days of this government. The answer, of course, was to hire an ER closure or an ER consultant. Mr. Speaker, I think by bringing in Dr. Ross is a wonderful idea. You know, we need to have some kind of expertise to call from, something that I know from my meetings with Dr. Ross, that he's got a tremendous view, some tremendous insight on the operation of ERs around this province. But it gives cold comfort to the residents that are in these affected areas. I mean, what do we say to the people of Digby? I know the member for Digby Annapolis could probably recite how many days this month the ER is closed in Digby. And I know the member for Shelburne, the Minister of Fisheries, could tell me how many days it's closed in Shelburne. Or I'm sure the member for Cumberland North could tell me how many days the ER is closed in Pugwash. And I'm sure the member for Gay-Breton North can talk about how many times the Northside General is closed. I'm sure the Deputy Premier can tell me how many times the ER is closed in New Waterford. And I'm sure the member for Glaze Bay will tell me how many times it's closed. And the member for Annapolis can tell me how many times his ER is closed. So the issue is that it's now that we need to have some kind of solution. Mr. Speaker, on our second round to be able to speak to this issue, our leader will speak to it and talk about the solution that she was able to come up with in Colchester to stop the closures at Tatamagouche and to stop the closures in the district in that district. But what causes a closure? You know, it's the unavailability of a doctor, unavailability of nursing. What are the solutions to that? Well, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that we have the highest concentration of doctors per population of any province in Canada. You know, we have the doctors. Not that we don't have the doctors, we have the doctors. They might be dispersed around this province a little bit in a haphazard way. The concentration, of course, probably would be here in Metro, where they can work Capital District, where they can continue to work with Dalhousie, via med school, or what have you, in order to do research and those kinds of things. Mr. Speaker, what we need to do is find opportunities to get those doctors to move out and work in rural emergency rooms. Mr. Speaker, we also have to work with the staffing ratios that we have in those emergency rooms as well. You know, I think gone is the day where you need to have this kind of person or that kind of person. If we look at, let's say, Yarmouth. Yarmouth has a wonderful emergency room which does not experience closures, yet is one that is notoriously slow. Mr. Speaker, I know that the doctors work as best they can, as fast as they can, as hard as they can, but maybe there's some processes. And I as Minister of Health at the time, provided that district with, I believe it was like $56,000 to create a better flow in that emergency room. Mr. Speaker, I think by utilizing people like nurse practitioners, working with paramedics, advanced care paramedics, we should be able to clear and fix the flow in the emergency room, as well as find opportunities to keep them open. Mr. Speaker, the other thing is finding the better way to pay for the services that we are receiving. Mr. Speaker, we know right now when you work an overnight, you get paid more to work the overnight. So you'll see actually in the closure lists that emergency rooms tend to be open more at night than they are during the day when they don't get that surcharge. And heck, if you go to some of these emergency rooms, they might see 1, 2, 3 patients during an overnight process, an overnight period, versus seeing 50, 60 or so patients during the day. So remuneration needs to change in how we treat these emergency rooms. So, Mr. Speaker, I forget how much time I have left here, but ultimately, the districts have the capability, with a little bit of support from the Department of Health, to make the changes to ensure that the emergency rooms remain open. Mr. Speaker, there will be some tough decisions to be made too, I think. If we look at the Corpus Sanchez report, the transformation of our healthcare system, there were some very valid recommendations within it that would allow a better model of care. And many times we trumpet what happens at Annapolis, what happens at the Annapolis Hospital, the emergency room there, and how that whole clinic, after the terrible cuts in healthcare back in the early 90s, that they were able to find a way to work collaboratively, not just doctors, but nurses and other practitioners, and keep that emergency room open. Now, Mr. Speaker, it is experiencing a bit of problems. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we need to find something, and I'm sure that the member for Halifax Clayton Park, I was going to say Fairview, I apologize for that. It's close, but not quite. And I know she'll speak to, I think, what's happening in Annapolis and her ideas as well. But I think it just takes a lot of people working together. We don't need a big report to tell us what's wrong with the system. I think we just simply need to, pull up our bootstraps and get the job done. So, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to seeing the comments from the other members, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's my pleasure to speak today a few words. I think I have 9 minutes to speak on the emergency room closures, and believe me, 9 minutes is just enough to barely skim the surface of this subject. Luckily, we've heard where a lot of those emergency rooms are, so I don't need to go through them geographically, but we know how important having emergency rooms open in the smaller communities and here in Metro and right across the province, how important it is for people's peace of mind. And what we've seen over the last number of years has been a lot more, an increasing number of closures, really, to the point, Mr. Speaker, where closures now are not just occasionally being called, they're scheduled. They're scheduled in places where people expect 24-hour, 7-day-a-week emergency service. They're now being told, well, every Tuesday or every Thursday or alternate weekends you can expect us to be closed. And that may be good for planning, but it's certainly not good for people's peace of mind, Mr. Speaker. And a lot of times when other rooms are supposed to be open, they're not, and people are ending up going farther and farther from home when they need to see a doctor on an emergency basis. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to begin my comments by making the point that the current government, the NDP government, campaigned and promised from one end of this province to the other that they would keep emergency rooms open everywhere, all emergency rooms 24 hours a day.
And that promise, I've got to say, resonated in communities because it's what people want. It's what they want to hear, and that was what that government fed to them. And what I'm worried about today, Mr. Speaker, is that there is a lack of will to follow through on that promise. Because we've heard several times today, we're 102 days into this new government, and in fact, the closures continue. The figures I've been given for today show that since June 10th, the emergency rooms have been closed almost 4,000 hours in this province. If you add them all up over 3 months, 3,963 hours, Mr. Speaker. And that doesn't sound to me like a move towards having them open all the time. In fact, if you take the same period of time from the year before, when the province was being governed by the Conservative Party, there were 128 hours less closures. So maybe a margin, maybe a small amount, but there were in fact fewer closures a year ago for that 3-month period than there is this year. I think that is a telling statistic, Mr. Speaker. It points to the fact that there hasn't been progress. We've in fact declined further in terms of closures. And the one thing we've seen in this last little while that the government's done is appoint a very learned person to be our ER advisor. So now we have a single person, while he's out there studying, he's going to fill in and actually provide some emergency services in emergency rooms around the province. And I hope that doesn't take him too many hours, because I'm sure he could become a one-man locum service. And that's a little bit what we're worried about, Mr. Speaker, because we don't need a lot more studies, and we need more than one person being the locum registry for the province's ERs. What we really need, Mr. Speaker, is the plan that the NDP presumably had, when they promised to keep emergency rooms open. What was the plan? Why hasn't it happened? And why haven't we heard anything more than the appointment of an advisor? And, one person alone is not going to make this change. So we also are being told we have to wait a full year for this person to do the studies. And as I say, we have the highest regard for Dr. Ross. I want to make that clear. Everybody in this House has a very high regard for Dr. John Ross. He has, one of the things I admire most, he's been outspoken. When he's been on the front line here at the QE2, he spoke out when the closures were, well, it was too overcrowded, when there were difficulties, when they were calling Code Orange and so on. So we know that he will be honest, that he will assess the situation, and that he'll give us good, solid answers based on his own experience. And I'm glad, because we need people who will tell government and tell those of us in elected office the truth. And I know that he is one of those people. So, I applaud his appointment if we're going to go that route, if we're going to have an advisor. I think he's a good one. But what we've said from the start, Mr. Speaker, what we campaigned on, and I say we, the Liberal Party, campaigned on a really solid idea for emergency rooms, and that was the idea of creating a locum registry. A list. Locums, for those of you who don't know, locums are what they call it when a doctor goes and takes a short-term appointment in another practice. I'd mentioned here earlier in another late debate not long ago, my father was a doctor, and at one point he did a 3-month locum in Parsborough. So he had the opportunity to live and work in Parsborough for a short period of time while he gave the doctor that lived there a time to go do other things or recover, or whatever the reason was that he needed time off. So that's a common practice. Now, there are locum registries used for emergency rooms in Ontario in particular. I know there are other places, but I'm going to reference Ontario because I've heard directly about them. They create a list of doctors. They're not all emergency room specialists. Some of them are family doctors, but doctors that are qualified to go in and fill shifts at the emergency. And you can put your name on that list if you've got some flexibility in your schedule, and agree to serve in Northern Ontario, or sometimes it's right in the hospitals in Toronto, to say, I'll take a weekend and do 3 shifts this weekend. And we have doctors, Mr. Speaker, you will be surprised to know this, doctors from here in Nova Scotia on that registry, flying up to Ontario, serving 2 or 3 or 4 shifts on a weekend, and then coming back, and they're well paid to do that. It's worth their while to go there and have that time spent, and in fact the registry and the communities they're going into make it very attractive for them. Not only financially, they'll make sure they're put up in a hotel. They might give them tickets to the theatre, to a ball game, so that it's really quite attractive. And here are our own doctors choosing to go there because the locums registry is available and they can put in for weekends or for shifts that they can do. But no, Mr. Speaker, it's been tried and true somewhere else, but no, we don't want to try that here, apparently. Even though we know it works, even though we know we have lots of doctors and they would love to do this. And I think we're just not making use of the services and the people that we have right in our own system, Mr. Speaker. So I think, again, we'd like to throw out once more the idea that a very practical, immediate solution to some of these closures would be to create that registry today. Not a year from now, after Dr. Ross has had a year to study it and fill in. And as I say, I go back to the idea that he's going to test the waters in these different emergency rooms by filling in himself. Mr. Speaker, how many minutes do I have? Just 2 minutes left?
2 minutes.
2 minutes left. Mr. Speaker, again, I can probably recap in those 2 minutes. There was a promise made, a solid commitment from the NDP, and yet we have more closures than we've seen the year before. I'm not satisfied that we've hired an advisor who's going to take a full year before we'll have recommendations and changes made. I would like to, in a very respectful and positive way, suggest that the Department of Health and the Minister of Health look again at the option of creating a registry for doctors to fill in here in our own province. Even started, Mr. Speaker, on a pilot project basis. Pick one DHA, pick one of the emergency rooms that has chronic closures. I think you'll find that it would work immediately, and then we'd be able to move forward. I had a chance to visit the QE2 new emergency room. We've spent an inordinate amount of money to make that far better. I admit it's well designed and it works well, but Mr. Speaker, it's not helping really with the overcrowding there either. Thank goodness they're not closed, but they're overcrowded. With the H1N1 coming, I'm concerned what's going to happen at the emergency rooms as we go forward. Mr. Speaker, it's really time that we looked at the resources we have. I wanted to mention at the QE2, they are using paramedics in the intake area, freeing up nurses to be in other parts of the emergency room. And those paramedics, and in fact there was another paramedic working further back in the actual emergency room itself, not just in the assessments. They receive a little bit of extra training to do that, so they have some special training. But Mr. Speaker, they're filling in and allowing some of the other medical professionals to be used more productively. There's another immediate answer that we see in place in Halifax today. So please, Mr. Speaker, my plea to the government is that they look at some of these obvious answers. Thank you.
Thank you. The Speaker now recognizes the honourable member from Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to stand and address this important issue. I've stood many times over the years, Mr. Speaker, to discuss this very important issue, Mr. Speaker, and it's important that we recognize where we came from in order to see the crisis we see before us here today, Mr. Speaker. There's results, the results of decisions made by past governments have indicated why we see such a crisis in healthcare delivery today in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. And I talk about decisions made not only 5 or 10 years ago, but 15 years ago, Mr. Speaker, when the Liberal government cut and slashed healthcare, where they cut nurses, they cut doctors' medical seats at the medical school, Mr. Speaker. They rolled back wages, they cut beds in hospitals, Mr. Speaker. We're feeling that effect now. Then, after that, Mr. Speaker, we had a Conservative government that ignored the issues for so long, Mr. Speaker. They ignored the issues for over 10 years, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, I can say that we did not ignore people in Nova Scotia. That is just absolutely false of what he's saying there.
It's a dispute between two members, not a point of order. Thank you. The honourable member for Sackville and Cobequid.
Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, they ignored issues within health care for so long, Mr. Speaker, and it was because of efforts like our party when we were in official opposition that changes were made. They did do some good things, Mr. Speaker, but it was because we pushed and pressured them to make those changes, Mr. Speaker. I talk about the draconian practice, Mr. Speaker, of charging seniors health care costs in long-term care facilities. The Conservative government did not want to make those changes, Mr. Speaker. So we made those changes. We pushed that change, Mr. Speaker. So today, seniors are not being charged for health care in this province.
Order. Order. The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid has the floor. Thank you.
Another issue, Mr. Speaker, is the cancer drug Avastin. The government said they would not cover that drug, Mr. Speaker, and it was people and advocates like Jim Connors, Judy Young, who came forward with the stories and the issues, Mr. Speaker, and we pressured the government to do the right thing, Mr. Speaker. We're happy that they finally did that, Mr. Speaker. There's going to be challenges to fixing the health services and delivery here in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. It's a challenge for which we're ready for, Mr. Speaker, because this party, more than any other party, is committed to the quality health care and will make the right decisions, Mr. Speaker. We are going to put patients first, something that I think has been ignored for too long in this province, Mr. Speaker. We are going to decide when we decide where we're going to build hospitals, when or where we invest new equipment, Mr. Speaker, it will be because the patients need it. It won't be because we're buying votes, Mr. Speaker. The days of playing politics with healthcare dollars are over, Mr. Speaker. They're over because we need to realize that delivery of healthcare is important to all Nova Scotians, no matter where they live in this province, Mr. Speaker. If you live in Sydney...
Order, please. The member from Sackville-Cobequid has the floor. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No matter if they live in Sydney or New Yarmouth, Mr. Speaker, those decisions need to be made because of what the patients in those areas need, Mr. Speaker. In June, Nova Scotians put their faith in us, Mr. Speaker, and we will not let them down. Our commitment to health care is beyond reproach, Mr. Speaker. We will do everything in our power to fulfill the promises made that we made to Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. Nova Scotia has a strong public health care system, Mr. Speaker. We're committed to making it better, Mr. Speaker. We've committed to Nova Scotians that we would deliver on our promises over the last number of years, Mr. Speaker. And one of the commitments we made, Mr. Speaker, was to ensure that we had an emergency room advisor, and we have done that. The Minister of Health has announced Dr. John Ross, who will consult with healthcare professionals, Mr. Speaker, something that I think lacked in the previous government, where they would not consult with those individuals, those healthcare providers who delivered the services, Mr. Speaker. And I'll give one example on how the former government didn't do, I think, the proper consultation and ensuring that healthcare delivery was the top priority, Mr. Speaker. We look at the example of patient records. When the former government introduced patient records, Mr. Speaker, to a hospital, they didn't realize that the nurse who was taking care of that patient needed to be beside the patient the whole time, Mr. Speaker. But no, they had to leave, Mr. Speaker, that patient and go input the public or the patient's information into a computer system, which was at the nurse's desk, Mr. Speaker. If they would have asked and consulted that healthcare provider in the first place, Mr. Speaker, on what would be best for them to deliver the healthcare services that they would need, they would have saved millions of dollars, Mr. Speaker. We will gather information and review data on patterns of use and demand on emergency rooms, Mr. Speaker, throughout the province to understand the root causes of persistent emergency room closures in small rural communities. We look forward to hearing Dr. Ross's recommendation. He is well respected within the healthcare system, Mr. Speaker, especially with emergency rooms. Mr. Speaker, emergency departments. He has worked very hard at the Capital Health at QE2 Emerge to deliver the best possible care to the patients that utilize that facility, Mr. Speaker, and I have full confidence he'll be an asset to this government and to the people of the province to ensure that changes that need to be made in emergency rooms will be made, Mr. Speaker. In the meantime, Nova Scotia regional and tertiary care emergency departments throughout our province are always open, and emergency care is delivered in those facilities. And I want to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that Nova Scotians know also that we have one of the best emergency services here in the province with our ground ambulance. We have men and women ready to act upon any emergency throughout the province, Mr. Speaker, and I think Nova Scotians be rest assured that their needs will be well met. To stabilize physicians' coverage in rural areas, Mr. Speaker, and to better meet the emergency department needs for our communities, we've given the districts more freedom to tailor services and doctors' compensation to their unique situation, Mr. Speaker. We have increased funding for locum programs and are paying our emergency physicians more to help keep emergency departments open, something that I think the member from Halifax, Clayton Park, mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker. But we have We've also extended the interim financial arrangement with Cumberland Health Authority, Mr. Speaker, which hopefully will increase their ability to provide services in our local area, Mr. Speaker. How much time do I have? 2 minutes. An effective, accessible healthcare system is important to all Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. We know that access to care is crucial to families and their communities, Mr. Speaker. We've heard that time and time again, Mr. Speaker, as we were in opposition. And as the former health critic, Mr. Speaker, for the past 4 years, I am very confident now in the leadership that we have with the Minister of Health and our Premier, Mr. Speaker, that the Nova Scotians will be well served, Mr. Speaker, by our Minister of Health and our Premier. They'll be well served, Mr. Speaker, something that I haven't been able to say in many, many years in this legislature, Mr. Speaker. We care about Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. We will strive to provide better patient care. We will make the right choices, Mr. Speaker, for Nova Scotians that will help lower wait times and give Nova Scotians the kind of health care they deserve, Mr. Speaker, when and where they need it. And I'm confident that our government will live up to our commitments and provide the necessary services that Nova Scotians need in our communities throughout this province, Mr. Speaker. We have an excellent number of healthcare providers who provide amazing services throughout our communities, Mr. Speaker, from paramedics to nurses to nurse practitioners, the whole gamut of healthcare providers and allied health support services, Mr. Speaker. So I'm confident that Nova Scotians will allow us to make the changes that we need to provide better service in healthcare here in our province, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to say that I'm pleased to be able to stand in my place and address the issue, a very serious issue, as everyone knows, about being able to deliver quality health care in a timely fashion to the communities in Nova Scotia. And as the Minister of Health, former Minister of Health, I certainly recognized very early on that emergency rooms and the issue of closures, the issue of overcrowding, and the issue of patient flow were all very real issues within those emergency departments. It was not long into the time as minister that we had Dr. Ross getting some attention with his Code Orange. And I think it's important to know, I certainly respect Dr. Ross. I met him 2 days after he called that Code Orange because I thought it was important that we talk. My understanding of the use of Code Orange was that Code Orange is used for internal crises. And internal crises at the QE2 had not been called, the Code Orange had not been used since the Swiss Air accident. So whether it was appropriate that Code Orange be called or not is the question, and it was a question that many people answered and are asked, and I asked that of Dr. Ross, and I think he recognized that there were other options he might have had, but in the course of his frustration with what was happening within that particular emergency department, he opted to get attention. Now, I also invited the CEO of Capital, Chris Power, to come into my office on the day that the Code Orange was called. And I think it's important for everyone in this House to know that there are many, many factors that contribute to the issue of emergency room overcrowding and emergency room closures. One of the things that we discussed with the CEO, both she and I with my deputy, and then also with Dr. Ross, was more to do with patient flow and to do with procedures that were in place to improve the patient flow in that particular hospital. One of the things that I was told at that time was that a new set of procedures and guidelines to manage patient flow was going to be put in place 1st of February. And on a monthly basis, I was able to monitor that with the CEO. And I would be very interested to know, now that we've gone into this most recent crises in the emergency departments, what happened to that new set of directions and those new procedures that were intended to improve patient flow and thus avoid the crisis situation. So it would be very interesting if the Minister of Health would be able to share that with all members of the House, because it certainly was designed, according to the CEO and supported by Dr. Ross, to be a part of a solution. Perhaps it has not been as effective as it was designed to be. Another part of the whole issue with emergency room closures has to do with something that I stood in the House and shared with my colleagues and shared with all members of the House, and that was that the closures and the cause of closures that exist throughout the province are unique to the individual hospitals in which they occur. People have criticized that, saying, no, we just need to get a consultant and he will have a solution. Well, he fails to understand, or the people who have suggested that this would be the best move have not yet accepted the fact that the conditions that exist in Digby that contribute to closures are not the same as they are in Pugwash, nor Parsbro, nor Tatamagouche. Every one of those has a unique set of circumstances, and thus every one of them requires a unique solution. So it's not one size fits all. Unfortunately, I believe the members opposite have campaigned and led Nova Scotians to believe initially that one size fits all. But it's been not long into their mandate that the folks in Cumberland County, in particular in Pugwash and Parsbro, have recognized that the one size fits all has not fit in those particular communities. The Deputy Minister went out to meet with the folks with the DHA number 5, and in those discussions there was a great announcement that solution had been found. And as my colleague opposite has suggested, those closures continue to grow and continue to increase. So it is unique. And what has to happen, and where there's a will and where somebody will sit down, there is a way. And I'm very proud to say, as Minister of Health, there was a way to address the closures in Lillian Fraser. It was done within existing human resources. It was done within the master agreement for doctors. But what it took was the DHA, Department of Health staff, and community folks sitting down and saying, let's solve this ourselves. And I was very happy to be part of that solution. And I can tell you that since that time, there have been no closures in Lillian Fraser for July or August or September. But what this government fails to realize is they've got to get out, they've got to get out of their office, they've got to work with the DHAs, and they've got to work with the resources that are there. I met with the folks in Digby. Completely different problem. Will take a completely different solution. So the whole approach and the misleading of Nova Scotians by saying we'll hire a consultant, we'll pay him $100,000, he'll work 2 days a week, and lo and behold, in a year's time, we might have a solution. Well, I'm here to tell you folks that that will not work, and Nova Scotians know it will not work. One of the things I would like to say in closing is that I do respect the professionals who are working in our hospitals and in our emergency departments. And when I was touring the hospitals, I met with those folks, and the one place I asked to go was to the emergency departments, and they are extremely committed folks who have given their time and their dedication to the health care of the folks in our hospitals. And so I do want to say that whether it's the paramedics, whether it's the people who are arriving on foot to the ambulance, to the emergency departments, whether it's the people receiving them or the people giving them the care, every one of those health care providers is committed to their job. What this government needs to do is to forget about taking a one-size-fits-all and get out into the communities and talk to the folks who have the solutions and make sure that, that what is happening now does not continue, because this is not what we wanted. This is not what we were prepared to do. And, you know, that the whole complications of emergency departments.
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I hear members opposite saying it will happen. We'll not hold our breath, because we've had 100 days and you campaigned on that and it has not yet happened, and the will of the people to sit down and come up with a solution allowed it to happen. And that example that was set is not an example that this government is prepared to look at, because it does not fit with a $100,000 two-day-a-week consultant. I wish to table schedules here that show you that the solution to the problem has not yet been found. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. The Speaker now recognizes the Deputy House Leader for the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call resolution number 192?
Resolution number 192. The Honourable Member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a shame and I feel bad to stand in my place here tonight to speak on Resolution 192 when there's an easy fix. An issue that is hurting my riding. The people are arguing and fighting, and in small communities. Mr. Speaker, the people in those communities have a deep concern about their environment. There's been numerous public meetings that nobody from the government side would come to. There's been numerous council meetings and PAC meetings that not one member from government would come to. Mr. Speaker, it's a total shame and lack of respect for the people of Yarmouth area that this government will not even come down and listen to the concerns of the people. The citizens of Yarmouth are not against fur farming, Mr. Speaker, but what they are against is maybe polluting a waterway in Yarmouth. That is right, maybe. That is right, maybe. Maybe there's a way that we can prevent this from ever happening. Maybe we should have the study before we talk about this. Why don't you stand to your feet and speak onto the issue? If the issue was maybe in your riding and the people who had a concern, you might get to your feet if the Premier would take the muzzle off the Minister.
Order, please.
Mr. Speaker?
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Member for Yarmouth has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, the environment is very precious, and we must all do our part to protect it. And when that group was on this side, they had all the answers, Mr. Speaker. All the answers. Everything that was going on, they had the answer for it. And now the Minister of Environment has chosen to turn his back on the people of Southwest Nova. Mr. Speaker, there was a radio call-in show on Sunday, and the radio was flogged with calls of people of concerns. And I told him what this minister had to say, that the issue, he's been at this job for 100 days and he's resolved the issue. Well, the people in Yarmouth do not know the issue is resolved. The people on Sunday at a rally in Yarmouth did not know the issue was resolved. Monday night, the issue at the council meeting, the issue has not been resolved. It's the minister from Shelburne, I believe he is. He's from the southwest area. Mr. Speaker, all the people of Yarmouth has asked for from day one, all they have asked for is a moratorium in the Yarmouth area only. In the Yarmouth area only until the environmental study on the waterways were completed, so we could tell what is causing the environmental issue. So what is wrong with that, Mr. Speaker? Why can't they hear that loud and clear? Why do they want the citizens of my community to be arguing and bickering over this issue when there's a very simple solution? put a moratorium until the study is complete. That is so simple. I guess that maybe that's why it's not being done. There has been threats on people's lives in Yarmouth. There's been threats. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that we sure hope that no one gets hurt. But if anybody does, the onus will be on that minister. Because the councils have asked that minister to intervene, the people has asked him to intervene, and he's sat back and done absolutely nothing. Nothing. They did have a private meeting. They did have a private meeting with a handful of citizens from a few different communities, but they would not have the backbone to stand up and come out and meet the people of the community at a public meeting. Mr. Speaker, I don't know why they won't come down. I guess maybe Yarmouth, it's because we don't have a highway system all the way to Yarmouth. I don't know what the issue is.
The member got too many votes.
But, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that I will provide every member of that government tea and biscuits if that's what they need to come to a community. Because I heard that's what they want when they go to a community, is tea and biscuits. We'll give them green tea, whatever color they want. They will have tea. Mr. Speaker, I'll take it a step further. Tonight, I asked the Premier and his full cabinet to come to Yarmouth. They would have an opportunity to see the issues in our community. Maybe the Minister of Community Services wouldn't even have to answer the 2 letters that I've already sent to her. She could see firsthand. I would take her around and show her the housing issues in our community. And I know that our councils will. I know that. Maybe the good Minister of Health would come down, and I can assure you there would be a number of senior citizens that will come out to a public meeting to meet with her to talk about the in-home care support that they so badly need, that this government is turning their backs on them. Yes, and the Minister of TIR, we would invite you down. Maybe you could see that there's no highway to Yarmouth on either shore. There's no completed highway. We announced the 103. We announced the 103, but there's been nothing from this government since they took office. And every member from the South Shore has their muzzles on. They're not allowed to speak about the 103 or any other issues. And we're seeing the marks on their cheeks where the muzzles are getting tighter.
Member from Save Islands is spokesperson now.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Service Nova Scotia could meet with the councils, and I'm sure that my good colleague from Argyll will bring his council over. We could have one meeting with all 3 councils and discuss the issues in our communities. And there are numerous issues. Mr. Speaker, as I've said numerous times since I've been on my feet, we have issues with transportation in Southwest Nova. Our ferries are bleeding from the eyes. They need some assistance from this government. Our airport needs help. Our highways need help. But what does this government choose? They choose not to even speak to the people, ignore the people.
Blinders. Put blinders on.
Well, I can tell you, there's no blinders on this member, and he will stand up for the people of Yarmouth. And they can hackle and bug me all they want, but it doesn't matter. I guarantee you, I can outshout them 10-1. 10-1, right, Wayne? Isn't that right? And Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, and I am so glad the Minister...
Order. The honourable member for Yarmouth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the Minister from Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal is here, because he mentioned in this House one day, a week ago, that when you get 2,000 votes, come and talk to me. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'll reiterate it again today. 4,537 votes I took to writing. Every poll last one. The people told me to stand in this House and speak for the people of Yarmouth, and I can tell you I darn well will. And I guarantee you the ministers are going to get so tired of hearing it, but that's okay.
Order.
That's all
Order,
right.
please. Could the members please speak, the honourable member please speak to the resolution?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have been speaking to it, but no one's listening. No one is listening. The Minister of Environment is sitting there in a daze. He doesn't know. I've invited him to a public meeting, And if he wants a public meeting this weekend, I can assure you I will have the public meeting. And I can tell you this, Mr. Speaker, that if he don't come to my riding to meet with the people, we will come to this legislature. And I will drive the bus if I have to, Mr. Speaker, but we will come here. And we will let them know that there's a concern in our community and the environment cannot be overlooked, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The members of the House probably be glad to know I'm going to speak to the resolution and not about highways in Southwest Nova. And the reason is this is a very serious issue, and I think that the member for Yarmouth has brought forward something that should be of concern to all members of this House, and it's something that I believe is going to require the minister taking it upon himself to bring together all levels of government, as well as people in the industry, the fur ranching industry, as well as members of the public. Mr. Speaker, on September, well, my goodness, yesterday, or today's Wednesday, I'm ahead of myself, today in the Chronicle Herald out of Yarmouth, and I'll table this, there's an article about the proposed mink farm, and they talk about how the Yarmouth YMCA said they had to close their summer camp this year because of algae in the water that some believe was caused by runoff from existing mink farms in Digby County. Mr. Speaker, there's no question that the fur ranching industry is very important in Nova Scotia. We have the single largest mink industry in the country. I understand there were about 700,000 pelts last year. And so this isn't about closing down an industry and shouldn't be about closing down an industry. And I think that what happens is when you get a number of these ranches who may be causing problems, that in fact they may tarnish the entire industry. And so it's incumbent upon the government to get to the bottom of this situation. Now, Mr. Speaker, some of the background on this actually troubles me a bit. And it troubles me because when I read it, none of it sounds good. Back in 2005, the Southwest Shore Development Authority, as I'm told, sent a letter to the warden of the municipality of Barrington, who's now the provincial minister of the environment. And in it, they indicated that they were planning an experimental mink farm where new mink farmers would be trained and they would be mentored and so forth. And so this went on for a little while, and as I understand it, there wasn't much of that got out to the public until the province then provided a $950,000 loan, which would have been under the previous government. And February 27, 2006, Barrington municipal councillors voted 6-1 to sell 120 acres of public land for this purpose for $66,000. So we have the Minister of the Environment who is involved in this at some point along the way. And in fairness to the Minister, it's 6-1. He may have been the one that was the vote against. I honestly have no idea. But he certainly knew about it at that time before even joining this House. And then when I look further, I find out that not only did the previous government give a $950,000 loan to some of these operations, but a report done for the Department of the Environment, and that's available on the internet, so I have to assume that it's available to the current minister and was available to the previous minister, dated March 18th, 2009, actually pointed to the idea that there may be an issue with mink farms and runoff into lakes, and that more investigation is needed. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I stand here and I look at this, and you know, although I've been to a mink ranch and I've seen how these things operate, I don't for a second profess to be an expert in mink ranching. But what I can say is that when I read the conclusions of the report done for the Minister of the Environment at the time, and I assume that report is still available to the current minister, the conclusion actually suggests that the minister investigate to find the potential sources of the cyanobacteria. But it doesn't seem like a lot of that was done. In fact, you know, when I look at just in the past few days, the many articles that have been written in community papers or in the Herald and so forth about this issue, it seems that either the work isn't being done to identify the sources of the runoff, and in fact whether it is from the mink industry, and let's accept for a moment that it is from a couple of farms, but not identifying them, or if we have identified them, then the public isn't being told about that. And we heard the honourable member from Yarmouth talk about that a bit earlier, that the members of the public are not getting that information. And there's a number of problems with that. One, there are a lot of people who have homes or cottages, or you heard the YMCA who have camps here, who are very concerned that they can't use the watercourses for recreational purposes. Then we hear people from the fur ranching industry saying, you know, there might be a couple of guys out there, or women, who are causing us hardship and causing a bad reputation for our entire industry. And so what I'm troubled about, Mr. Speaker, is that I haven't heard in any of the questioning from the honourable member from Clare or the honourable member from Yarmouth to the current minister of any effort to try and bring all the parties together and get to a resolution on this issue, which is the only way that we're going to solve this, in my view, and the only way that we're going to have a situation where people actually believe in the process of the Department of the Environment and actually believe they're there to protect them. In fact, I think that when they look at the government at the moment, they think the opposite. Because at a public meeting that was held not that long ago, which I understand was held in Weymouth, a representative of the Department of Agriculture was asked whether they look at mink farms and how they regulate them, and the answer that was given by the representative who attended on behalf of the department was, quote, "The facility has to be built before we do our permitting inspection." It was in Carleton. Thank you very much. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It strikes me that it's kind of like the horse has left the barn. You have to have some of this permitting in place beforehand. But the reason that you also need the municipalities involved, and the Minister of the Environment would know this as well as anybody else in the House who's served on a municipal council, that the municipalities have a role in this too in terms of setting the zoning and what the regulations are going to be. However, Mr. Speaker, those zoning regulations can only go so far. And odds are there's no municipality that's going to create a mink ranch zone. They're going to create an industrial zone, or they're going to create some type of industrial zone that allows a number of uses. Thank you. And so, Mr. Speaker, what has to happen is the work has to be in conjunction with the municipalities so that the municipalities know that when they create zoning laws, that the Departments of Agriculture and the Department of Environment are going to be there to ensure that the uses don't pollute the waters, don't further damage the environment. Mr. Speaker, I'm very concerned about this, and the more that I learn about it and the more that I read about it, the more concerned I get about it. Because it strikes me that it's not only, as far as I can tell, it's not only being ignored by the current government, but it was ignored by the previous government who's bringing this motion forward. And that, you can clap, but Mr. Speaker, it's interesting to hear the members of the government clap, in fact, that their own government is one of the parties ignoring it. The fact of the matter is, both of them are ignoring it, but we all need to get to a solution because this is good for nobody. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, look, I'm really pleased to have an opportunity to speak to this resolution. I'll be sharing my time with the Minister of Environment, and I really want to speak to the issue of the moratorium as much as anything, because that really falls under the purview of the Minister of Agriculture. And I'm glad to hear the member from Yarmouth speak. I've been a member of the House for 11 years, agricultural critic for 11 years. I never got a call or a question in this House on mink farming. And I was surprised that with the question of the moratorium that the minister from Yarmouth raised kept going to the Minister of Environment. But I want to say that to the member who just spoke, well, in that time, and actually not in my 102 days, but in very few days, did this issue of mink farming come up, and in all my career, never heard an issue. Never ever heard the member from Yarmouth speak against the mink industry. Never heard him speak about mink at all. So what I want to tell the members opposite, There's no point in saying might be this and might be that. You can't impact the lives of those farmers or any citizen on an assumption. There has to be clear evidence that there's been pollution by a particular mink farm or more than one mink farm, and we don't have that. There's research being done to try to find out what the cause of the algae is, and that hasn't directed to any particular cause. It could be mink, it could be other agriculture, it could be septic systems in the area. We don't know. As far as the moratorium goes, I've been told that there may be good legal grounds for me to be unable to stop a development based on our application process if they meet the conditions of the application. There are problems with the application process. My department has been in discussion with the meat industry for over a year in the process of drafting new regulation for that industry. These present farms got approvals from the municipalities for their development. We want to impose environmental farm plans, which they agree to do, and put conditions associated with those environmental farm plans, which we haven't imposed on other farms, but try to allay the fears of the communities in this regard. So I want the member from Yarmouth had 9 minutes to speak. I didn't time how much time he spent off the topic, but in his 9 minutes to speak on this issue that was so important to raise a resolution in the House, he couldn't speak for 9 minutes on it. On September 8th, my colleague, the Minister of Environment, and I went to Yarmouth, and we met with people from those communities who were recognized as concerned citizens with this issue. I'm going to say 15, a dozen, okay? Now you can go back and tell them they weren't worthy of meeting. I thought they were. They had a request in to meet. I was glad to go do it. The issue around the moratorium, if someone in your community had a dysfunctional septic system and somebody else puts in for a building permit, would you say no because somebody else's system is bad? Why would you blame the person who hasn't built one? Seems to be kind of ridiculous. So we recognize that there may be issues. The mink industry has grown and grown and grown. And the department, my department, recognizes the need for us to step in, have regulation for that industry, draft new legislation, and you know, the people in that industry have been saying they agree. They're interested in seeing change. It's one of those areas of agriculture that's making money. It generates about $80 million in the community, 60% of which is spent within 30 kilometers of the area of the farm. That should be worth a lot to the people in Yarmouth, certainly to the municipal council, to the Chamber of Commerce. They all should be glad to have mink farms in their area. But they do not want a lake polluted because of it. That would be a reasonable thought, not to have a lake polluted because of it. And that's the steps that we want to take to assure them that it won't happen. Well, I can tell the member opposite, the farms that don't exist are not polluting the lakes. So, for those people who have a concern, then we have to identify whether the pollution in any lake or any waterway is caused by mink, and that hasn't been made clear yet. There's no evidence of that. So whether it's mink farming or any plant down the road of another type, people want to know that their environment is safe. And we're going to take steps to ensure that those fears that people have can be put to rest, because this is an industry worth keeping, their environment is worth protecting, and this NDP government is going to do that, and I share my time with the Minister of Environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member opposite for this resolution regarding this particular matter. As we have just heard, the issues regarding the operation of mink farms are dealt with my honourable colleague's department. I know the Department of Agriculture is watching this very closely and is listening to Nova Scotians and to the mink farmers. As previously mentioned, on September the 8th, the Minister of Agriculture and I met with concerned citizens and toured some of the mink farms. We both are committed to working on options for improving the management of mink farms. It is also important to note that the mink farmers in Nova Scotia, like other forms of farming, do not require an approval from the Department of Environment to operate. Again, the development of farms, including mink ranches in rural Nova Scotia, is governed by Nova Scotia of Agriculture. That department provides advice and directions to the ranchers through farm management plans and nutrient management guidelines. Mr. Speaker, we have heard about the actions they are taking to address this issue. Our environmental department works closely with Nova Scotia Agriculture in investigating any possible point sources of contaminations that may result in poor water quality. Mr. Speaker, our government believes that the best future of Nova Scotia lies in recognizing the connection between the environment, protection, and the economic sustainability prosperity. The Department of Environment is concerned with both sides of this principle. This issue is perhaps a good example of putting the principle into practice. Environment health and economic health go hand in hand. Each rely on each other. With that being said, I am pleased to speak to the potential environmental implications that have been part of this discussion. Environment Department staff members have been investigating water quality issues in the watershed of the Yarmouth area. We continue to do research to support the investigation, and we will keep monitoring and following up on information as it is collected. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report today that our staff has completed water sampling in the Sloan's Lake and the Clyde River sites in Shelburne and Yarmouth counties. Those samples will provide important baseline data. The baseline data will help us assess whether any effects develop in that water. So these actions may be taken. As well, the operator of the proposed mink ranch in Sloan's Lake and Clyde River have agreed to participate in monitoring programs to help prevent adverse effects. On the topic, our department staff will continue to work with stakeholders in Nova Scotia Agriculture to address any sources of contaminations to these water systems that may result from mink farming. Algae blooms in water are caused by a rise in levels of nutrients. That rise can have a varied effect or causes. We need to rely on monitoring and science to address the contributing factors to this problem. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward for the rest of the debate.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very happy to stand today and speak to this resolution. Mr. Speaker, as you know, as the members of this House know, I was fortunate enough for 2 years to be Minister of Agriculture. And if you look at this very impassioned discussion around this issue, you can understand why the member for Yarmouth is so impassioned about it in his community. Because what's happening in his community is that a lot of things have gotten blown out of proportion. If you look at the discussions that are happening in Carleton, no, he wouldn't actually.
He does know.
Yeah. Where was I? Right. If you look at what's happening in that community, and because this has been allowed to get out of control, and by various people, okay, because of the inaction or the visible inaction by the Departments of Agriculture and Department of Environment, that the community has rallied against the mink industry, an industry that I have tons of respect for, an industry that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe 4 farms in my riding alone, which up to last week or the week before, or when this whole thing started to get completely blown out of proportion, when the minister lost the file, I had not received one phone call on mink farms. I had not received one email on mink farms. But yet can tell you, over the last number of weeks, it hasn't stopped. It hasn't stopped because of the inaction, or by letting this thing, oh, you know, we've got it figured out. Don't worry about it, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. It's a simple fix. You know, the minister alluded to it earlier. We have to have better regulation on the treatment of the manure coming off of those farms. The dairy farms had to do it a long time ago. They've had a phenomenal manure management plan. But why hasn't the department moved quicker in this particular case to take care of that community and what the community is feeling right now? Mr. Speaker, Lake Fanning is polluted. And I know you had the opportunity to visit Lake Fanning, I believe, and the surrounding lakes as they lead up the Carleton River up to the 340, and where the concentration, the highest concentration of mink farming is in this province. And I don't remember what the number is in that area, but it's like 1 million animals, or like the concentration's incredible. That water, that cleaning, the manure that would be created would be phenomenal. So the community has put 2 and 2 together and said, that's why that water is polluted. Whether it is or it isn't. And the member alluded to that. He said, you know, we don't know what's causing the bloom. Well, the community has put 2 and 2 together. And regardless, you know, the frustration that the member has is that he's called for help. He's called for people to come down and try to explain this. You know, he's called because he believes the industry is good too, and it needs a bit of tuning up, and it can coexist very nicely in a community like Carleton. I know it can coexist in a community like Argyle Head. Now, Argyle Head, what I'm getting from Argyle Head now, are the same concerns. We might not have the algae bloom, but what we have is people complaining about the stink and people complaining about the flies. I have never heard that up to now. So we need to find a mechanism in which to allay the fears of those communities and not to damage the industry. Because right now, the industry, in my mind, hasn't really stepped up a little bit here. They need to be, their voice needs to be heard too. You know, Camp Wapameaw, my boy, my 10-year-old boy had the opportunity this summer to go to Camp Wapameaw. Now, whether or not he had a good time or not, that's up to him. I tell you, he was upset when he got finished up, but I can say that I know he had a good time because he talked about the swimming. He talked about the swimming and the canoeing and all the stuff that he was able to do at Camp Wapameaw. And he was looking forward to another session at Camp Wapameaw next year. Because of the algae bloom, Camp Wapameaw probably will shut its doors for the first time in 78 years. There's a huge community that supports Camp Wapameaw. They're upset, and they put 2 and 2 together, and they're blaming the mink industry.
They're blaming the minister now.
So what we're saying is, before things get too far out of hand, because right now, there actually was a death threat against the guy that's building that farm, or wants to build that farm in the Carleton area. A death threat, Mr. Speaker. We need to find a way to say, all right, listen, in order to have a timeout, a place to maybe cool our heels, or whatever you want to call it, is maybe a small moratorium. Just say, listen, while we're researching the water system, while environment's doing their work, while the regulations are being put together by the Department of Agriculture, ones that I would support, because I've said it before, that we need to cool our heels and maybe put that little moratorium on for a very short period of time. I mean, we're not building thousands of mink farms around this province right now. This is the only one that I'm aware of, and there might be 1 or 2 others. So it's not going to be a big hit to the industry. We need to calm down. We need to calm those communities down. We need to give them a voice. We need to be able to let them be heard. And it's in the power of the government that sits in front of me and the two ministers that I'm looking at right now, Mr. Speaker. You know, do it for not only the sake, you know, it's not just about the member for Yarmouth or the residents of Carleton or Lake Fanning. It's about the industry as well. One that brings millions of dollars to our community, brings millions of dollars to our province, and one that is, in my mind, very sustainable. So all we need to do, as I said, is maybe cool our heels a little bit, protect that water system, find out what's wrong with it, and fix it. Mr. Speaker, that's all we want to have happen, is fix it for the residents of Carleton and fix it for the residents of this province. Thank you very much.
Thank you, honourable member, for the debate this evening, and honourable members in the legislature and this assembly. We are approaching the moment of interruption, and I will recognize the honourable government house leader for the schedule for tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after the daily routine and question period, we will be going into the whole house and supply debate, and we will be sitting from the hours tomorrow of 2 till 8 p.m. And now I ask you do now rise.
Thank you. The motion before the House is that we rise and meet again tomorrow at the hour of 2 p.m. Is the House ready for the question? Agreed? Agreed. Those in favor? Aye. Motion is carried. The subject matter for late debate tonight is a resolution put forward by the honourable member for Hammond Plains Upper Sackville. Therefore be it resolved, this House recognize removing the HST from home electricity effective August the 1st of this year is a positive step towards making life better for Nova Scotian families.